live from the International Film Studio, McNeil Film Studios in beautiful Baja Tustin, is Professor Mark McNeil, here to teach us about unemployment.
Well, speaking of unemployment, our announcer is now unemployed. Federico, fire that guy. All right. The topic is unemployment. And, you have to say, what is unemployment? And the answer is, unemployment is generally defined as actively seeking employment and unable to find it. That's the normal concept of unemployment. You're looking for work, you can't find it, you're unemployed. What if you're not looking for work? If you're not looking for work and don't have it, you're not unemployed, you're not in the labor force. You're not working. Okay, the labor force is composed of two groups. The people who are working and the people who are unemployed. So if you're unemployed, you're looking for work, and by looking for work, you declare yourself to be a part of the labor force. So it's these two groups, the groups that are working and also the ones who are actively seeking employment. Now, the big issue with unemployment is it's almost impossible to measure, and it's almost impossible to separate out the dimension of voluntarism from the issue of really being unemployed. Generally speaking, can you always find some productive employment of your talents? There's a very good guy at Cal State Fullerton who always tells his classes, if you ever find yourself out of work, come to me, I will give you a job. And they, of course, are suspicious, and they say, well, what's the work? And he says, something very unpleasant. And they say, well, what's the pay? And he says, something considerably below the minimum wage. Okay, are his students now able to be unemployed? Can they always find work if they look for it? And the answer is yes. So technically, by that strict technical standard of unemployment, they can't be unemployed. So, but is the pay too low? Is the work harsh or not consistent with their training and that sort of thing? And they refuse the job if the pay is too low or if it's not consistent with what they do or they have to travel too much. If they turn down a job like that, that's too far away or pays too little or is in a different area from their training, are they really unemployed? Are they sort of voluntarily unemployed? It's just an interesting question. Are there costs to being employed? Yeah, you have to work, you have to get transportation, clothes, lunches, childcare. There are costs of being employed. Are there costs of being unemployed as well? Yeah, if you're unemployed, you don't get that steady income. And, they might repossess your car or you can't, pay the mortgage anymore. These are all potential costs of being unemployed. But if you're receiving benefits of some sort because you're employed, does it increase the cost of being employed when you have to give up those benefits? So it turns out that for both employees and employers, they are making decisions about, the employer is making a decision about the relative benefits, marginal benefits and marginal costs of employing some person. And they're basically just saying, what's it going to cost me to employ this person and how much revenue or benefit will this person bring me? And if the marginal benefits exceed the marginal cost, they'll do it, and if not, they won't. And the employee, the applicant for the job, is thinking the same way. I'm looking at the marginal benefits of being employed compared to the marginal costs of taking a job. And you have to understand that from both sides, these are decisions by both parties. It's not just this magic, well, there just aren't jobs. It's not, it's much more than that. And if we look at different groups of people in the economy, like sole wage earners in a household, that's a household that only has one person working. What are the costs of being unemployed to that person? Incredibly high. The kids can't eat and they may get kicked out of their apartment or something. So the costs of being unemployed are very high. What about the cost of being unemployed to a second wage earner in a household? Well, they're not as high as the sole wage earner because if they're the second income, there's always that first income that will take care of the basics and they're probably not going to get kicked out of their house and so forth. So they can put food on the table. What is the cost of being unemployed to a teenager in a family? And for most teenagers, the cost of being unemployed is very low. If they are unemployed, not much bad is going to happen to them. So, do you suppose that the rates of unemployment will be different for these three groups? Do you think the sole wage earner is going to get all hot-headed and tell the boss to take this job and shove it? Or are they going to find a new job before they get hot-headed with their boss? And the answer is they'll find another job. The unemployment rate among sole wage earners is very low because the costs of unemployment are very high. Among second wage earners in a family, the unemployment rate measured is higher. And with teens in a family, the unemployment rate is very high among teenagers because the costs of being unemployed are so low. So how is unemployment measured? Well, the BLS, that's the Bureau of Labor Statistics, does a survey of 65,000 households per month. And they ask the same questions. Is each adult over 16, that's an adult, over 16, working? If the answer is yes, they're working, then they're counted as employed. But if they're not working, then they ask, have they looked for work? And if they have not looked for work in the past 4 weeks, they are not in the labor force. But if they have looked for work in the last 4 weeks, they are counted as part of the labor force. Then they ask, is the person who has looked for work, and is that person available for work if it is offered to them? A lot of people, when they're out of work, they say, well, I'm looking for work, but I'm going surfing in Costa Rica. That person, even though they've looked for work, is not available for work, and so they're not counted as part of the labor force. And finally, there's such a thing as discouraged workers. Discouraged worker is somebody who hasn't looked for work in the past 4 weeks, but would like to work. It's just that they've looked and looked, and they believe that they won't find work, so they've stopped looking. Those workers are not counted as unemployed. They are, however, measured. You know, they keep track of discouraged workers. And there's this statistic called the U's. And if you look at it, the discouraged workers are counted in one of the measures of unemployment. I think it's U6 maybe. All right, specifically, how do you calculate? Well, unemployment. Well, this is the country, and here is the population of this country. The entire population of the country is 250 million. Sorry, it's messy. Yeah, it's messy too. 250 million is the population of the country. Then you have to take out the under 16 or institutionalized. That would be in insane asylums or prisons or something like that. And what you're left with is this group here. This group is the adult population. So if you have 250 is the total population, and out of that total population, 50 are under 16, that means the adult population has to be 200 million. Now, out of the adult population, there's a whole bunch of people who are not working. These are retired people, housewives, house husbands, full-time students, and recent lottery winners. I do occasionally buy a lottery ticket because in California, hope costs $1. And if it should ever happen that I win the lottery, I'm going to be on the beach of Puerto Vallarta. And these videos are done. I've enjoyed them. That's the not working group. Because I'm going to join it if I win that lottery. All right, so that leaves the labor force. I've had to put it in this group. Maybe I can get another color or something. So the labor force would be this group. The entire group that has two parts to it. The people who are employed and the people who are unemployed. Those two groups together are the labor force. So if you have an adult population of 200 million, and out of that 200 million, 60 are not working. They're not in the labor force either. So what's the labor force then? The labor force would be 200 minus the 60 is 140. And out of that labor force, 8 million are unemployed. They're actively seeking employment, unable to find it. So how many are working then? Well, the labor force is 140. Out of that 148 are working, which means are unemployed, which means 132 is the number employed. So when we go to calculate, The unemployment rate is the ratio of the number unemployed divided by the labor force. So it's this group, unemployed, divided by the labor force, which is 140. So 8 divided by 140 equals 5.71%. That's the unemployment rate. But there are two other rates you need to know. One is the employment rate, and that's the number of people who are employed in the economy divided by the adult population. Do you see it has a different numerator and a different denominator? So the number employed is 132. The adult population is 200. 132 divided by 200 times 100 to make it a percent is 66.7%. The final rate you need to know is the labor force participation rate, which is the labor force, that is employed and unemployed. So the number in the labor force is 140 million divided by the adult population, 200, times 100 to make it a percent. The labor force participation rate is 70%. Now it turns out that the labor force participation rate is very consequential these days because we have baby boomers leaving the labor force, moving from the labor force into the not working section, and it turns out we have a whole bunch of fairly young males who are not in the labor force. They stay home and play games all day and hang out with their buddies. Yes, some of the crew is looking a little guilty at this very moment. All right, types of unemployment: frictional, structural, cyclical. There's also this seasonal unemployment. You know, like ski instructors are unemployed in the summertime, but then they're employed in the wintertime. Farm workers are employed in the summertime, not in the wintertime. And normally when they publish the statistics, they have an idea of how much of the employment is in fact seasonal, and they adjust it for that. But frictional unemployment is unemployment from people in transition. Transition, that is people who are changing jobs or who are getting out of college and now looking for work. The jobs are there, but it takes time for the people to find the employers and make the deals and get in there, finally get on the job. Frictional unemployment is normally people moving from lower skilled, lower paying jobs to higher skilled, higher paying jobs. Generally speaking, this is good for the people. When they change jobs and they're more productive, they get more money. And it's also good from the society's point of view to put people in higher productivity areas. So it's good from the society's point of view and good from the individual's point of view. Structural unemployment is the result of changes in demand or technology. This is like the teller machines displacing bank tellers. Well, that's structural. It's because of changes in technology or demand. It's good from the society's point of view to have technology improving and make people more productive and so forth. But from the individuals, like the bank tellers are not all that happy that the country is better off, but they've lost their job or have to retrain and find a new occupation. Cyclical unemployment is the result of economic cycles. Turns out that when the economy goes into a recession, people start buying fewer things, and now the factories that are producing these things can't sell all that they're producing, and they lay people off. That's cyclical unemployment. It's the result of economic cycles. Now there's something called the natural level of employment. That's where the supply of labor and the demand for labor meet. That's the natural level of employment. And the natural rate of unemployment includes only these two things, because in a normal, healthy economy, we will always have frictional and structural unemployment. And so that's the natural rate of unemployment, and most people think of it as between 4 and 5, maybe %, something like that. It's composed, the natural rate of unemployment is composed of frictional and structural. When we look at labor markets, there's the supply of labor, there's the demand for labor, and this is the equilibrium wage that matches the number of people willing to work at that wage with the number of people who want to hire people to work at that wage. And so the quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. There are no surpluses or shortages. If in fact the wage was at W2 here, that would create a situation where the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. This would be a surplus of labor. If in fact the wage was at W0, this would create a shortage of labor. The quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied, that's a shortage. And the shortage puts upward pressure on price, a surplus puts downward pressure on price. In this case, the price is the wage. There's more to talk about. Is it possible to have too many people working? Yes, it starts making inflation go up. Is there a fixed number of jobs in the economy? So if an immigrant comes and takes a job from somebody already there, does it mean that person who has to leave the area will not find another job because there are only so many jobs? The answer is no. There are as many jobs as there are people willing to work and able to do a job. A job is really just, on the one hand, somebody wants something done, but they don't want to do it themselves, but they're willing to pay for it. But on the other side, there's somebody who would like to do the job for money. That's a job. And as long as there are wants, unmet, unfulfilled, as long as there is scarcity, there are jobs. So it's not going to happen that workers are going to be replaced by robots or artificial intelligence or any of that stuff anytime soon. It will cause dislocations, but there are jobs for everybody. I think maybe clear as mud, but I covered the ground. It was clear as mud, but it covered the ground. I'm done. And now I'm going to go fire someone.